Sing to Yahowah, ancient city call, stones remember all. Hear the shepherd's song, the herald summons, your king returns. Words written on the pages echo through the ages. Shema Yisrael, you must hear Yahowah's words so clear. In this night and in the day, echoes never fade away. David's songs forever sing. Mashiach's gift to you we bring. Lift the shofar to the sky. Yahowah is El Shaddai. Shema Yisrael, hear the sound. A message for you coming down. Daughters of Zion, lift your voice. The time has come to make your choice. Shema Yisrael, you must hear Yahowah's words so clear. In this night and in the day, echoes never fade away.
Good evening and happy Shabat to one and all. My name is Craig Wynn. I am known as Yada, and by some 20 other functional descriptive titles that were revealed through the prophets over the last few thousand years. I'm here this evening with Kirk and with Dee. You will find the books that I have written, 35 of them. They are not short by any stretch. They average about 650 pages apiece. All 35 of them are free in their entirety. They're offered at YadaYah.com. Yada means to know. Yah is the familial form of Yahweh's name. He happens to be God. So YadaYah.com, you'll find some 35 books, all written there, available so that you might come to know who God is, what he is offering, and what he expects in return. We are this evening going to do a number of things for you. One is I did write a song. My wife wrote one. Dee, who is the co-host here on this program, wrote one as well on the discovery of the role and importance of the red heifer. And we will return to that text and Numbers 19 this evening. Numbers 19:7 is where we left off last week. And we'll play that song for you as well. This one I wrote to be a trilogy, if you will, of songs on what has turned out to be an exceedingly important role that needs to be played to reconcile the remnant of Yisrael for Yahweh's return. But rather than jumping right back in, I'm a big fan, as is God, of context, of knowing where we are and how things fit together. So, for example, the story of the red heifer, while essential for the time that it is occurring, is not among the top 20 or 30 themes that one should come to know as revealed in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms. The single most important aspect of knowing where to begin, of having the proper perspective on God and man, is God's name. God's name is not Hashem. He's disgusted by that. He never once uses it. His name is not God or G-D. That's simply a title, and he applies it not only to himself, but he uses it to describe false gods. His name most certainly is not Jesus. In fact, there was no one named Jesus who ever lived.
Mm-hmm.
He is, of course, not Allah. Allah is the dim-witted companion of Muhammad, who was modeled after Hasatan, the adversary. He is a snake. Oh, Yahweh is God's one and only name. His name is not difficult to pronounce. It is comprised of 4 vowels. Those vowels are known through the most common words spoken in the Hebrew language. Yahweh introduced his name to Moshe in the Torah, and he said that it was based upon the Hebrew verb haya, which means to exist. Haya has 2 of the, actually 3 letters comprising Yahweh's name, because the heys are repeated. And so haya tells you how to pronounce it, and it also tells you what it means. I exist. The only letter that you need to know beside the hey and the yod is therefore the wa, and the book that his name was conveyed to us is the Torah. The O sound in Torah is from the Hebrew wa. Enough said. There are several other names that are very important for us to know in God's story, for you to know. The most important name, other than God's name, is that of Dod. It has been corrupted to David, even though there is no V letter or sound in the Hebrew alphabet. His name is Dod, and it means beloved. The second most important person in God's story is Moshe. He is the shepherd who went back into Mitzrayim to liberate the children of Yisrael. And his name is important because it means to draw out, which is what Yahweh was trying to achieve with all of us. But it also tells us something very important about God that we should never lose sight of. And that is that God chooses to work through us. And whom he chooses to use is his decision. We have no right to tell him that choosing an 80-year-old shepherd to go back into Egypt who stuttered and who had a death warrant on his name to liberate his irascible people was a poor idea, that he should have done what some of the right-wingers wanted to do in Gaza and just nuke the place and call it a day. Not how God works.
No.
He always chooses to work through people, and he picks the individuals who he thinks will do the best job.
Right.
And Moshe was that man for that time, because Moshe had grown up in the inner circle of the religious and political, economic, and military leaders of Egypt. He knew what was wrong with religion and politics. He left it. He stood up against it, and then he left it, which made him the perfect candidate for this particular mission. The third most important name would be Abraham. It means father who enriches. And after he left Babel with his wife, Sarah, and they were invited into the promised land, Yahweh revealed the 5 benefits and the 5 conditions of his covenant relationship. As for places, the entire story, with very few exceptions, takes place in this tiny postage stamp-sized country called Israel. You know, the first story, creation, of course, is universal in its scope. The next story is very regional in terms of the flood. I should say the next story is actually Gan Eden. Gan Eden is very specific to one spot. It's where the rivers came together, and if you can trace the headwaters of those rivers, you would know that the Garden of Great Joy is co-located with where Lake Van currently is in eastern Turkey. That third story would be another regional story. That would be the Great Flood, commenced with an upwelling of deep seawater, specifically what Yahweh says in his Torah, with an asteroid impact. The Berkel impact crater, it caused a giant tsunami to flood through the region, buried the Black Sea, which is where the people, in particular the Nephilim, that were arrogant and religious and acted like Hamas, uses that term, terrorists, that he needed to do a reset so that humanity would have a chance at the plan that he was proposing to reconcile us in our relationship with him. That flood wiped out those humans with an asama, which is a conscience that were using it poorly. But after that, there is the long and very troubled sojourn into Mitzrayim, Egypt, another where 10 of the 12 tribes were taken as slaves into Assyria, and then there was the trip into Babylon, the timeout for bad behavior. But other than that, the story takes place in Yisrael. Time is very important to God, even though he exists outside the boundaries of time. And even though he does give us an accurate depiction of creation transpiring over 6 24-hour days, from his perspective, that perspective has been validated by the Wilkinson probe, which is able to discern how significantly time was stretched in the vicinity of the great energy and velocity of the Big Bang. We know that time is relative. It does not move at the same speed for all observers, and in the presence of great speed or great mass, great velocity or great mass, great amounts of energy, time would slow. We can divide what the Wilkinson probe has determined as the cosmic radiation background noise from the Big Bang, and we know that if we take 14 billion years and we divide them by 10 to the 12th power, which is the stretching of that wavelength, we get 6 24-hour days. Mm-hmm. From that point, as Adam and Chawah were settled in the Garden of Eden, they listened to a cherub that we now know as Satan, who came off the wall with aspirations to be perceived as a god, and he played off of Chawah's aspirations to be seen as a god as well. He twisted what Yahweh had instructed, and as a result, all three were banished from the garden. That is when God's timeline begins. 1,000 years later, Noah was born. He is the one whose name means trustworthy guide, that followed Yahweh's instructions and demonstrated that when we do listen to Yahweh and do as he says, that there is salvation for ourselves and for our families. The next marker in terms of time is 40 Yobel. 40 is the period of testing, and Yobel is the 7 times 7 plus 1 periods, 50-year periods, where all debts are forgiven, the land is returned, and all slaves are freed. Well, 40 Yobel from the time that Adam and Chawah were escorted out of the Garden of Eden is to the time that they, with God, man, Adam's descendant, Abraham, and his firstborn son through Sarah, Yishak, went to Mount Moriah to confirm the conditions of the covenant. That was in 1968 BCE, exactly 2,000 years or 40 Yobel from the time that Adam and Chawah were escorted out of the garden. 1,000 years later, 20 Yobel from that point, we come to the time that the cornerstone of Yahweh's house on Mount Moriah was laid by Dod's son, Solomon. Dod himself passed away, the great king, the Messiah, the prophet and lyricist, 4 years prior to that time in his first life, having left us the legacy of Mizmor, Psalms, and Mashal, Proverbs. His is the most interesting and most important life ever lived. When you actually translate correctly what he wrote in his Mizmor, and you include the volitional moods, you find out that he chose to serve as the Passover lamb and to serve as the one who would take the guilt of the covenant family into Sheol on Matzah to perfect us, and that Yahweh supported his son's conclusion. Dod is the one person who Yahweh says on 3 occasions, "He is my son, and I am his father." He is the one that Yahweh orchestrated his anointing as Messiah 3 times. 1,000 years after that moment to the precise day, and we have just one event I should mention in between, which is that 7 years after Solomon commenced building Yahweh's home on Mount Moriah with the materials and plans he was given from his father, he gave a speech, the actual Sermon on the Mount, and in that speech, he specifically said that Israel should listen to and pay attention to a Nakri. The Nakri is an observant foreigner, and he prescribed numerous titles of this individual, all that fit the same person, who we later learn is this man from Edom, who would serve as Dod's Bashar herald and Yahweh's Kol voice as a choder, a secondary stem off the main branch, who as the third Zeroah would be productive in cultivating the harvest. His name is Yada. So 1,000 years thereafter, Dod, as predicted by himself, came into Jerusalem to fulfill the first 3 Moed Mikre. They are Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim. Pesach, by serving as the Passover lamb, he opened the door to Yahweh's home. He opened the door to life and life eternal. And then on Matzah, his nefesh soul carried the guilt of every covenant member into Sheol, depositing it there so that we are seen as perfect by God. This is the single greatest sacrifice and act in human history. Mm-hmm. And it is our Messiah and the Son of God, the chosen one, Dod, who did this for us in year 4000 Yah, in that Yobel year, the 80th Yobel year, with him also being the individual who wrote the eyewitness accounts to what he would achieve. Read Psalm 22 and 88, for example. And then the prophet Yasha'yah also explains what he did as the Lamb of God in his 53rd chapter. And he speaks of Dod as being the son, who was this child who was born, this son who was given to us that would serve in all of these magnificent ways. That individual is Dod, and his name is actually mentioned in the prophecy. 40 Yobel from the time in 33 CE, year 4000 Yah, that Dod fulfilled the spring Mikre, Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim, and I didn't mention Bakurim, but should. Bakurim is the 3rd day in that series where the firstborn son of God legitimized the meaning of firstborn children, which is what Bakurim means. And his nefesh soul was released from Sheol and returned home in heaven to his father. He was enriched and empowered as a result, but by fulfilling those 3 Mikre, he showed us the path to follow, to be part of the covenant family. And in fulfilling those 5 of the benefits of the covenant were enabled, which is eternal life being perfected, being adopted into God's family, being empowered and enriched by the Almighty. 40 Yobel thereafter is 2033. There are 4 Mikre to be fulfilled. The first of those 4 is fulfilled 7 years in advance of 2033, which is when the last 3 will be fulfilled. The outlier in the middle, of course, is the harvest of Shabuah. Shabuah means 7 sevens, and we celebrate it in its fulfillment 7 years before the final 3 Moed Mikre are observed in terms of their fulfillment. Shabuah is a harvest of standing grain. It represents an ingathering of both Israelites and of Goyim, symbolized by the varieties of wheat, the broad-based invitees to attend the Mikre of different ethnicities, genders, ages, social standings, and also the 2 loaves of bread. That harvest is upcoming. It is at the beginning of the time of Jacob's troubles, which will commence on May 22nd, 2026, which is when the 2-state dissolution will be imposed upon Israel. The 7 years that follow will be exceedingly hectic and very difficult for Israel because the voice of every covenant member, including this one, will be removed from the earth, and no one will speak for Yahweh other than the legacy of these programs and this site for the next 3.5 years, at which time I will return with Elia, and we will take up residence on the Temple Mount, which we will clean of all Islamic rubbish. We will have help erecting a replica of the tent of the restoring witness on top of it, and Yahweh will orchestrate great signs in the sky to draw people's attention to how close we are to the end and what needs to happen for us to reconcile our relationship with God. The last 3 Moed Mikre are then Towrah, which we will talk about at great length. Towrah is both a gleaning, a ingathering of olives representing Israelites, but it is also a day where the mortal remnant of Israel is left behind, and that is why it is on the morning of Towrah, which rabbis have corrupted to Rosh Hashanah, playing back into their Babylonian stay. But it is on the morning of Towrah that Yahweh offers the sacrifice of the red heifer, which is what we'll return to momentarily. This prepares the children of Israel, that remnant who is still filthy with their religious guilt, for Yahweh's return, so that they can be seen in God's presence. The homecoming is on Yom Kippurim, the day of reconciliations, when Dod will return to anoint the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant. 5 days thereafter, we begin 1,000 years of camping out with Yahweh on Sukkah. That is the story of the Mikre. They support and provide the benefits of the Bereth covenant. The future, and I'll try to share this as briefly as possible. We've talked about it in other programs. But the future for Israel is really quite bleak until it becomes quite bright. Israel is going to, and Jews are going to continue to endure rising anti-Semitism, almost palpable and intolerable levels of anti-Semitism, rage and violence against them. It's going to be far worse for Israel than it was in Europe during the 1920s and 1930s. And we're told by the prophets that the ongoing attacks by Muslims flooding into Israel will be far more egregious and deadly and horrific than anything Israel has ever experienced. And when you consider that Israel lost 6 million souls to Europeans and during the Holocaust, that is
staggering,
right, shattering, horrifying. And the fact is that the prophets tell us that 2 out of every 3 Jews are going to die over that 7-year period of time. And while that is tragic, it's going to be even worse for Goyim. The world's going to erupt in world wars. And the primary war that Israel's going to fight is going to be a 100-fold reenactment of what occurred on 10/7/23. And so that you know, Israel, what occurred on 10/7/23 was a reenactment of what occurred 1,400 years earlier, when Muhammad created Islam, and after rabbis sold Muhammad Talmud readings so that he could complete his Quran and then mocked him, Muhammad, rather than pay them for the stories they had sold him, and rather than admit that he had bought these stories, that they were not inspired by Allah, and that he bastardized them to suit his situation, making them laughable. The Quran is easily the dumbest book ever written. And I prove it. Go read Goddamn Religions, 5 volumes, 4,000 pages of analysis of the earliest Islamic text to demonstrate what I'm saying is not my opinion, but a factual reasonable and evidence-based conclusion based upon the facts in this case. But Muhammad decided that the easiest way to deal with rabbis mocking him was to slaughter them, and he did. And so he and his goons raped the women, they enslaved the children, which is the same as abducting them, and they murdered the men brutally. So what happened on 10/7/23 was nothing but a reenactment of what happened in Yathrib and again in Bamidbar during Muhammad's lifetime, where he perpetrated genocide against the Jews. That is their fate, and it will continue to get darker and darker until Satan arrives in a corporeal form, and then the two witnesses arrive to combat his rhetoric. But it gets nastier and nastier for Israel and for Jews until finally Yom Kippurim, and actually the respite begins with the Towrah harvest, and then with the sacrifice of the red heifer, followed by Yahweh's and Dod's return on Kippurim. So that's the brief history of time. Now, into this story, Yahweh inserts the red heifer. The red heifer is prophetic, even though the story is told in the Torah. It is told in Bamidbar, Numbers 19. Although there is considerable prophetic references to this, the one that drew our attention to it is actually in Yasha'yah 17, where the great prophet tells us specifically that during the Teruah gleaning, that after the Zeroah, which is the one cultivating the harvest, this would be Yada, after he has successfully arranged for there to have been a final gleaning of covenant members comprised of Israelites streaming as light to heaven on Teruah in year 6000 Yah, this would be the evening of September 23rd, 2033, that the following morning, sunrise, still Teruah, he, as now the red heifer, will sacrifice his corporeal body. And it is what God does with that body that restores Israel, prepares Israel to witness Yahweh's return. It's what makes it possible for Yahweh to return to his people. Otherwise, after the Shabuah and the Teruah harvest, he has a family. They're already in heaven. There is no reason to come back to earth, and he would not do so unless the remnant of his people was properly prepared. And that is the reason for the sacrifice. Matter of fact, Dee, you were also reading in Yirmiyah.
Yeah, Yirmiyah. Yeah, 16:18.
And and there the prophet says?
He says, so first and foremost, which is Wa Rishon, I will require total and complete restitution, Shalem, 2 times over, which is Mishneh, for their religious corruptions and for them being wrong and missing the way. And the context of this chapter is that Israel has already gone astray, and this restitution will take place at the end of time. A second restitution is required.
Yeah, so that's one of the reasons that I wanted to provide a sweeping concept of time. Mm-hmm. We know that Israel was irascible, was rebellious against God from the very beginning with Adam and Chawah. It continued thereafter with their descendants. Look at the behavior of Cain. Then look what happened in Babel to cause Yahweh to change human dialects so that we weren't all speaking the same language. And then you understand how that grew even worse, and Yahweh had to do a reset with Noah, I mean, the history of civilization is the history of control and subjugation, of the enslavement of other people. So man collectively has been basically bad. And then you even look at the patriarchs. Abraham was not a good man. He did things that would cause me to cringe. He pimped his wife out twice for added livestock. This is not a good thing. And then you look at Jacob, and Jacob's almost his whole life is just a mess. He very seldom says or does something that you would say, well, that is a bright man that knows Yahweh and that is acting in a responsible way. And as a result of Jacob not being a very good man, not a very astute man, his sons went amok in a big way and quickly. And they not only sold a brother into slavery, but when they went into Egypt, they ended up enslaved. When they finally had somebody that would stand up for them, Moshe, they immediately turned on him. This is a really bad attitude. And then Moshe comes back with Yahweh to liberate them, and all they can do is bellyache. They want to be religious. They want to go back, complain. As a matter of fact, the worst story that is told on Yisrael is the waters of Meribah. It is a horrific episode. We will cover it in this material. It is presented in Numbers 20. The solution for that attitude is presented in Numbers 19. They go from one story to the next. And as a result of their horrible, embittered behavior during the Exodus, there is actually an explanation of what's called the adulterous woman. The adulterous woman isn't a female. It's just like the red heifer isn't a feminine cow. The Hebrew language uses masculine and feminine concepts to convey ideas but not necessarily gender. For example, the most important title for Dode is Zeroah. It's feminine. Yahweh's name is feminine. The most important book, Towrah, is feminine. The covenant is feminine. The spirit, Ruach, is feminine. So we need to have that appreciation. But throughout this entire episode, Israel became adulterous. And Yahweh explains in Numbers 5, where the adulterous woman is presented, that he defines adultery as cheating on him with false gods.
Right.
It's religious. Being religious, that is what Yahweh perceives to be unfaithful. It's the thing that he despises the most. And so his people have been cheating on him and are continuing to cheat on him with Judaism. The reason it's presented as a woman and her man, there is no Hebrew word for husband and wife. It is simply male individual and female individual. Well, there is an ish-ish. An ish is male individual, but when you repeat something in Hebrew like that, it has a geometric increase in the importance of it. It's like saying Kodesh, Kodesh, which we translate as the most set apart. Well, the ish-ish, the man among men, in Yahweh's story is Dode. And Dode wants his bride back. He wants Israel back. And she's filthy. She's a slut. She's a whore. She is a religious crack whore, is what, and you can throw politics into it as well. I'm laughing on politics. Sure. You know, the progressives make up about 20% of Israel. The Haredim, the right-wing religious wackos, make up about 20% of Israel. And most recently, the progressive movement of gays and lesbians and the like, the acronym has grown too large for me to be able to pronounce effectively. So we'll just say that the progressive, choose your sexual orientation group,
Yeah.
decided that they were not going to hold their confab in Tel Aviv this next time around, even though Tel Aviv is single most accommodating city in the world to people of gender confusion. And by the way, when I say that, I have nothing against lesbians and homosexuals. Yahowah doesn't either. I think transgender is a great absurdity and a crime. But homosexuality doesn't bother Yahowah at all. He doesn't even have an edict against it. It's a mistranslation that goes there.
Right.
And so that's not the issue. But it was funny to see the progressive gay and lesbian movement besmirch the most progressive gay and lesbian city in the world. They can't even get along. And it was all because, of course, progressives despise Israel. It's they are the new great promoters of anti-Semitism. So here we have Dode deciding, well, I'm coming back, and like it or not, that's my bride. So I want her back. Somebody needs to clean her up. And so the method that is prescribed to clean her up happens to be the same method that is being prescribed by Eliah as he orchestrates the sacrifice of the red heifer.
Yep.
It is all one united story. And we find verification of Eliah's role in all of this because the last words that God spoke to us through a prophet were to Malachi, the 4th chapter of Malachi, speaks specifically of the sacrifice of the red heifer and Eliah's role in orchestrating the affair. Well, as we rejoin Bamidbar in the wilderness, Numbers 18:7, halfway through, or 2/3 of the way through the story of the red heifer, I have to say that I first came to realize what was occurring next when I was translating Zechariah. And when we read Zechariah, one of the first things we recognize is that Yahowah is having a discussion with Hasatan, the adversary. And the adversary is saying, of all the filthy messes in the history of mankind, Yosha, which would be the Hebrew name of the person that didn't exist. If he actually did exist, his actual name would have been Yosha, the Christian Jesus. As it turns out, he's nothing but a crude counterfeit. But that would have been the individual. He is actually speaking of a high priest of a different period of time, post-exile in Babylon. And he says, this guy is just a mess. He's disgusting. God, you are not going to be able to do as you have promised, which is to anoint the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant, which is necessary for reconciliation on the day of reconciliations, which is Satan's big deal. If Satan can prevent Yahowah from returning because there's no one to return to on the family reunion and homecoming, he wins. He gets to stay. He doesn't have to go to Sheol. The earth, he doesn't care if it's destroyed. He's a spiritual being. So this is the great showdown, and he's saying you can't do it because the high priest is disgusting, and there really were none from that point on of any note. So Yahowah says, I have a solution. And Yahowah's solution is we're going to clean their clothes. I'm going to clean the wardrobe of the high priest because I've got somebody that I'm going to dress in that headband and in that gear. And the person that I've got in mind for this just happens to be my son. And when you read Zechariah, that is the only reasonable conclusion from those facts as he speaks of cleaning the clothes of the high priest. And you wonder, why would he do that? Because the high priest has to be presentable to come into the presence of the Ark of the Covenant. As a matter of fact, as we look at what happened, Aaron's two sons became religious. They tried to approach the Ark of the Covenant. God killed them.
Yeah.
Because God's presence, which resides over the Ark of the Covenant, God's presence will incinerate anyone who isn't properly prepared to be in his presence. And if you're carrying religious guilt or political guilt, you can't be there. It's a death sentence. This is the reason the red heifer has to exist, to clean all of that for God's people. But in the case of Aaron's two sons, they were killed, and so God spoke to Moshe and said, now, Aaron's just as bad. He's been rebellious.
Yeah.
He's been religious. He's a mess. So I have a prescription for him. He needs to sprinkle the blood of a bull, that would be my blood, on the approach to the mercy seat. And then he has to sprinkle the blood of a goat on the mercy seat to prepare himself and then Israel to be in my presence. The goat is Eliah. And the person who's going to do that is not Aaron. He's done. It's Dode. That is what's being said here. So the person being described is a stand-in for Eliah, who is a stand-in here. He's not just a stand-in. He is orchestrating all of these procedures, the ceremony that Yahweh has prescribed here and according to the Torah, but he is representing Dode in this discussion. So it reads, therefore, the one acting in the role of priest will launder and wash, cleansing his treacherous apparel, and bathe his body, removing his impurities in the water. The water is this spring that Yahweh has caused to flow beneath the sacrifice of the red heifer, of the Edowm Parah. And it's very much like during the days of Eliah, 2 millennia, 888 years prior to this event, when they doused the wood and the bowl prior to igniting it. But in this case, the waters are going to flow underneath it because it's the waters that cleans the Temple Mount, that flow off the Temple Mount, clean Jerusalem, and then also with the blood and with the ash, mostly the ash of the red heifer mixed into them, clean and prepare the children of Yisrael. And the fire incinerates their guilt. So their guilt is incinerated, and they themselves are cleaned by this process, but so is the high priest, so that the high priest can't do the job that is necessary on Kippurim, which is to approach the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant, which Yahweh will raise for the occasion. And then in the end, it says, in the end, this is a prophecy. It doesn't speak of yesterday. This was never done. Until I arrived in my lone visit to Israel in 2002, the spring of 2002, there had never been a red heifer seen in Israel. It is interesting, of course, that my one and only arrival was coterminous with the sighting of the red heifer in Israel. But this
That's super cool.
statement is about what will happen in the end. The end, as it relates to these prophecies and the fulfillment of them, is year 6000 Yah, which is 2033. So it says, therefore, the one acting in the role of priest will launder and wash, cleansing his treacherous apparel. If you want to understand that, you need to read both the story of Aaron approaching the Ark of the Covenant. You need to read the story of Yahweh telling Moshe to invest 3 days cleansing the apparel of the children of Yisrael for his appearance before them. And you have to read the story as it's prophetically presented in Zechariah, removing the impurities in the water, and then in the end, he may come to the encampment. But the priest will be unclean and defiled as a witness until the evening at sunset. Yom Kippurim, the day of reconciliations, is fulfilled as the sun goes down on October 2nd, 6:22 p.m. in 2033. The time that everyone needs to be clean and present before Yahweh is as that sun goes down on that day, which is why the prophecy is worded in this way. Well, there are many in Israel wearing treacherous and traitorous apparel today, all those who are playing religious dress-up, for example. Mm-hmm. Neither ash nor water is going to resolve their religious rebellion. And the same would be said about those who drape themselves in rainbow flags. This is more than what they wear on the outside that is corrupt and defiled. So are they. The sacrifice of the red heifer is not going to resolve the political and religious guilt of those who are still overtly political and religious. Mm-hmm. What it does is it takes the prior guilt, religious and political guilt, of those who have said, I get it. Condition of the covenant, we have to walk away from religion and politics. Those things are counter to Yahweh. They're counter to the covenant relationship He desires with us. We will forego those things and trust and rely on Yahweh instead. And then the prior guilt is incinerated relative to those people. So when we peel away the 20% of Israelites who are overtly religious, the Edowm, the 20% who are otherwise preoccupied with business or games, the 20% who are too political on the right and the left to make room for God, there is a potentially receptive remnant to be found among 20% of those surviving Israelites. With a population of 7.3 million Jews currently in Israel, growing by 100,000 a year, there is the potential for 8.2 million Israelites properly positioned to benefit from the red heifer. There are another 6.3 million Jews living in the United States and 2.2 million elsewhere, of which some 20% of those in diaspora will come home, for a total of 9.9 million potential beneficiaries. And the reason we speak of Jews in Jerusalem is that the waters mixed with ash that proceed from the sacrifice of the red heifer don't reach into the Americas or Europe.
No.
This is for that remnant who has been left behind during the Towrah harvest that are mortals living now in and around Jerusalem. There's a potential of 9.9 million. Now, unfortunately, only 1/3 of that collective number will survive the time of troubles, leaving an available population of 3.3 million Jews on Towrah. Of those left behind, some 20% will be potentially receptive, which is 660,000 people. This means that the 2 to 3 Yehudim on the uppermost branches, as described by the prophet Yasha'yah, and 4 to 5 on those branches of Israelites which had been cut off, would represent 1,000 individuals. I will have given my all to restore them. There has never been a more captivating or compelling orator than Elia, who will be the master of ceremonies. And Yahweh's plan is brilliant. Therefore, depending on how they respond, there could be anywhere from 70,000 to 700,000 ready and reconciled when Father and Son, Yahweh and Dod, return. If the larger number, that'd make a nice bookend to those dragged out of Mitzrayim, kicking and screaming 3,480 years prior to this day. Now, of course, in addition to those who were restored, and they are restored mortals, there will be many thousands of immortal sons and daughters of God who were withdrawn on Bokurim and Shabuah and Towrah because they are covenant members, children of God's family. Working all of this out is the reason that we are, that there are 3 harvests. This is why the red heifer is sacrificed and burned 10 days before Kippurim. Beneficiaries of the Shabuah harvest, the Towrah gleaning, are already perfected. They're beneficiaries of what Dod did on Pesach and Matzah, but not the mortal remnant left behind. The only way for them to come clean and be prepared to be seen in Yahweh's presence is through the sacrifice of the red heifer. Now, to appreciate why the one acting in the role of a priest in this context must be cleaned by way of the heifer's blood in addition to the ashes and water, we must turn to Korah, Leviticus 8:14 through 17, and consider Korah, Leviticus 16. There we find many of the same elements, the water and the ash, a bull's blood, and a goat, all being used to prepare the priest so that he can reconcile the people. But then to assess the prophetic picture, I should say, of what will occur so that Elia and Dod can perform as instructed, we have to study Zechariah 3. The cleansing of the priest is essential so that he is able to approach the tabernacle and enter the presence of the Ark of the Covenant. Now, the tabernacle is what's going to be restored on the Temple Mount, where the two witnesses will reside during that 3.5 years that they are standing and communicating to the world on behalf of Yahweh in Jerusalem. They're going to be on the Temple Mount. That means that I get my wish, and the Dome of the Hopi Print, the Dome of the Rock, and the Al-Aqsa Mosque will be destroyed. I will instantly incinerate them upon my arrival, and then with the help of the Malak, we're going to be establishing the tabernacle, which is where all of this is going to take place in and around the restoring tent of the witness. It is Yahweh and Dod with us providing an assist that will establish the eternal house of the covenant family. And Jerusalem, I think it will be made out of energy and light, but that is way above my pay grade at this point. The tabernacle is what will exist at least until Dod and Yahweh's return. So over this particular 10 days. So the cleansing of the priest, therefore, is essential for him to be able to approach and enter the tabernacle and the presence of the Ark of the Covenant, which will be returned to its proper place. The Ark of the Covenant is likely underneath the very place where Dod suffered crucifixion under the Romans, and in Yirmiyahu's grotto, it will be raised and then placed in this particular position for it to be anointed. This will expunge the children of Yisrael of their religious guilt. And should you be curious about the connection between the ashes and the water in this story and how one flowed from the other, the picture will become clearer when we review what Elia has done previously with the bull, the fire, and water before political and religious belligerence. That story in its entirety is prophetic of what will occur. We will turn to that story, which serves as the dress rehearsal for this one, and we will tie all of these things together in a future program. The reason that we are told that the impurities are resolved in the evening, which is after sunset, is as I have shared, because Yahweh and Dod are arriving at the commencement of Yom Kippurim, the Day of Reconciliations, at sunset, which will occur at 6:22 p.m. in Jerusalem on the Day of Reconciliations. That is October 2nd, 2033. That is when the remnant of Yisrael will either come clean or they're going to die in their political and religious filth. We will have done everything we can to awaken them to this option. It will be their choice. And this means that those left behind will have 10 days to recognize and capitalize upon what the Zeroah is offering and Elia, the great orator, is orchestrating. Numbers 19:8. And the one who burns it, he should wash his clothes in the water and bathe his body as a witness in the water. But he will be unclean and defiled as a witness throughout the evening, at least until sunset. In other words, the same process will be true for Eliah, even as the great prophet, as it will be for everyone else. You know, when Eliah and Yada are on the Temple Mount speaking for God, we will have returned from heaven. We will be the furthest from flesh and blood, ordinary humans. But on the morning of Towrah, I give all of that up and become mortal with a physical body that is bludgeoned by Hasatan. And so Eliah will likely become mortal at the same time. And therefore, he will receive the same benefit that is being provided to everyone else. The Yahweh likes to be consistent.
Wow.
So this is reminiscent of Yahweh asking the children of Israel to clean their apparel, as I've shared previously, before their first and last meeting together. This was the time that they responded poorly and told God that they never wanted to see him again or hear directly from him again. They have remained sullied all of this time, 3,480 years to be exact. If you are listening and you are a Jew and you're wondering, why do I need to listen to a goy tell me about my God and how to come clean so that I can welcome him back into my life? Well, that's the reason. You told your God to go away, that you never wanted to hear him speak to you again. So ever since that time, Yahweh has picked individuals through whom to communicate. And he chose to have the last individual be like all of the first. Everybody that he worked with initially was not Jewish.
Yes.
And so he is returning to form, as is his custom. Besides, not only was it God's choice, but he reemphasized this fact that it would be an observant foreigner, that it would be the man from Eden, that he would be a goy hundreds of times.
Yes.
And I tell you that, you know, you might not like Moshe or Dode, but God chose them. It was his choice. And it serves no purpose to argue with him. It is far wiser to learn from them. Now, rather than continue to wallow in the embittered waters of Meribah, which is the next story told in the Torah, the most horrifying, really, in the long, horrifying existence of Israeli embitteredness towards God. Israel is going to have one final opportunity to be cleansed and to be purged of all of its antagonism and resentment towards God. Therefore, the story of the red heifer, which was revealed in the Torah 3,471 years ago, is not only about an event that will unfold 9 years from now. By following Yah's instructions, the people will resolve the single worst episode in their history. If my math is correct, then the day, and when a day is compared to the 6,000 years after the exile from the garden, mankind has less than 6 seconds to return. And that the purification provided by the red heifer will be offered at the beginning, but will begin at the waning hours of Towrah during the time after the Lakot. We find that the restorative ashes of the parah are to be a shaf, harvested, which is consistent with the purpose of this day. More than this, they will be treasured by God and his people forevermore, becoming an eternal zakaron, reminder of what occurred on this day. When my wife wrote the first song on the red heifer, it was entitled Zacharon. And I think she actually meant to say that it was being written because of the Zeroah, which is the one cultivating the harvest, which is one of the titles that Yahweh has prescribed for the role that I'm playing. And the theme was Zacharon. And when I heard it the first time, I said, I don't know how you came up with this, but the fact of the matter is that Zacharon actually means memorable man. Zachar means man and to remember. And here Yahweh is saying, this is a Zacharon. This is a memorable man. This is somebody you should pay attention to. So the title that she chose turned out to be prophetic of specifically what Yahweh would say of this sacrifice and this individual. It is to remember what occurred on this day and the man who made it happen. And for the moment, by harvesting the ashes, Israelites will be reminded that they missed the previous harvest and have very little time remaining before sunset at the onset of Kippurim. Now let there be no doubt. The Edowm Parah, the red heifer, has offered his life to heer, restore and renew, to purify the remnant of Israel. His sacrifice will also cleanse Moriah, the Temple Mount, Jerusalem, the city of Dod, and Israel, which is the home of God. Bamidbar 19:9 reads in part, Then an individual who is restored and renewed, unsullied and purified, will gather up and harvest the ashes of the productive heifer, the parah, and he should provide a spiritual respite from outside of the encampment within a restored and renewed, purified and cleansed site, dwelling place, and home. The parallelism here is sublime. Those who were not ready for the Towrah harvest are now given the opportunity to gather up the ashes provided during the Moed so that they are ready for the spiritual respite provided on Kippurim, which will allow them to camp out with Yahweh on Sukkah. Equally marvelous, since the productive heifer is accepted their religious and their political dung before it was engulfed in flames and incinerated, by bathing in what remains, they are restored. They are renewed. They're purified. They're cleansed. And in the nick of time, because Yahweh is quickly approaching his dwelling place and home. Now, recognizing that the Edowm Parah was an Edah, restoring witness, when serving as a Zeroah, one cultivating the harvest, we find that this testimony will finally resonate with a resolutely observant group among Israel's remnant. I am unaware of any other place in the Torah where Yahweh is this overt regarding the source of restoration and renewal, and of cleaning and providing a spiritual respite, as he is here with the sacrifice of the red heifer. Yada's ensuing sacrifice is exceedingly important to God and to his people. It is the method he has chosen to prepare Yisrael for his homecoming and for the family reunion on Kippurim, the great and awesome day of Yahweh. And the Zeroah sacrifice is just for this day. It is for all days which follow as well. Dod's Bashar Herald is the Edah, the eternal witness to the restoring testimony of the children of Yisrael forevermore. It is and always will be their responsibility to closely examine and carefully consider what was given and what was gained. And so while I am the Edowm Parah and will make this sacrifice as Yahweh has foretold, it is he who will use it to resolve the guilt of his people. And this will be for a restoring witness to the eternal testimony, the Edah, of the children of Yisrael, the responsibility to observe the requirement to closely examine and carefully consider, accordingly, the water, to resolve the guilt through its offer to purify the corrupting scourge of having retreated and wandered away. Bamidbar, Numbers 19:9. Should anyone think that Moshe and I are making too big a deal of the waters drenched in the red heifer's blood and ashes flowing off of the Temple Mount, and that God should be able to wave a magic wand and make everyone sparkly clean, it just doesn't work that way.
No.
This has not only been presented in Yahweh's voice, but it is also consistent with everything else he has said and accomplished. Moshe, as an old man, accompanied God to free his people and then deliver the Torah. Dode, as a young man, wrote prophetically of what he would endure and then return to serve as the Passover lamb. By the time this occurs, I will have written more than all of the prophets combined, comprehensively sharing what has and will occur as we move closer to Yahweh's return. Over the past score of years, I have translated and expounded upon the Torah, the Nabi, Mizmor, and I have revealed thousands upon thousands of previously unheralded insights. And less than a decade from now, I will lay down my life to prepare Yisrael for Yahweh's return. Therefore, God is explaining what will occur so that his people are able to capitalize upon this gift. And it will be Yahweh who will do what is required for his plan to prevail. And make no mistake, this is Yahweh's plan. These are his words. Should you have a different idea? Well, goody for you. Get a box of crayons, draw it all up, staple it to your refrigerator, and see if anyone cares or benefits. Otherwise, listen to this one and act upon it.
Yes, sir.
After all, since practice makes perfect, we might as well start, since it will be the responsibility of everyone who benefits from this to observe it forevermore.
Mm-hmm.
As a reminder, Zaroah, as in the case with Parah, is a feminine manifestation of the same individual. These titles serve as a projection of the Nefesh soul, which is feminine, as enabled by the Ruach spirit, which is feminine, providing an Edah, eternal witness, to the restoring testimony, which is feminine, on behalf of the Bereth, which is feminine, served by the sacrifice of the Torah, feminine, in which the story is told. Even Yahweh, the God who made this possible, has a feminine name. So it's clear that Yahweh values maternal qualities. And in this case, by responding poorly to the red heifer sacrifice, there will be a spiritual respite, or responding properly. For those who do so, there will be a spiritual respite at the time it is needed most. And it will be provided courtesy of the Ruach Kodesh, the set-apart spirit, the maternal manifestation of Yahweh's nature. Even now, it is the women in the covenant who are the most instrumental in bringing this message home to God's people.
Yeah.
You know, the rabbis and the Haredim awake every day, and the first thing they say is, "Thank God I'm not a woman." Well, Yahweh has an entirely different view of this, as do I. Thank God there are women.
Yes, sir.
And our most, well, certainly in my most acclaimed moment, I am presented as one who is offering this gift in a feminine state.
Mm-hmm.
It is a nurturing move, which
Yeah.
is why.
Yeah.
And it is women who are fruitful, and para means to be fruitful. There are very few absolute mismerith requirements conveyed by God, other than we must disassociate from religion and politics to engage in the covenant, that men must be circumcised to benefit from Passover, and that negating Yahweh's name is unforgivable. Most everything else is a simple condition with a consequence. But here, with something that has not yet been experienced in the lives of God's people, we are told that we have a responsibility to observe this requirement, to closely examine and carefully consider the restorative and cleansing waters associated with the ashes of the Adamah Parah. So rest assured, God thinks this is a really big deal, that it is exceedingly important. And when we read the closing lines that Yahweh revealed through his last prophet, Malachi, he essentially said, if this were not done, I would simply destroy the earth. There'd be no reason to return.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Now, there are many reasons that this is so. First, the Towrah has reintroduced Yahweh's name. That's a really big deal. Second, the Bashar has restored Toad's acclaim.
Mm-hmm.
Second to Yahweh's name, that is probably the second most important thing that's been done in the last 3,000 years.
Yes, sir.
Third, the Zeroah will have cultivated the Shabuah and Teruah harvest of God's covenant family, although thanks to the women of the covenant, he has tremendous help in this regard. Fourth, the Edah has written the Yada Yahowah series to awaken the world and to lead Yisrael home. There are 35 books in that series, all offered free at yadayah.com. Fifth, the Nakar will be offering his life to make Yom Kippurim possible, the homecoming and family reunion. Sixth, the Kol, the voice, as the prince to the king, will need credibility. And this provides it so that he can do his job going forward effectively. And seventh, Yahweh likes to share credit. It's in his nature. When one of his children does something worthwhile, he views it as commendable, and he says so.
Mm-hmm.
That's just his nature, the nature of a father. Since the Adamah Parah's contribution to Yisrael will be memorialized forevermore, let's consider this illustration from the textbook on proper chodoring. As we do, recognize that Edom is derived from Adam, and it is therefore addressing the Adamah Parah. It not only reaffirms that the red heifer will be a man, as was the Pesach El, but also that he will become bloody red, as was the case with the Pesach El. Further, what was once just a private curiosity now matters. My genetics are primarily R1b, a blend of Ibero-Celtic blood from the borders of Iberia, Spain, and Gaul, France, with the Romans of Amorica, which is northern Gaul. As a genetic marker, R1b-U 152 came from the British Isles with the Roman legions. First with Julius Caesar and then with Hadrian, and why I have vociferously denounced Imperial Rome and its legacy, and I will personally condemn Hadrian to hell. Roman Catholic, all leaders of Roman Catholicism along with it. I nevertheless hail from Edom. Who is this who comes out of Edom in reddish garments from the sheepfold? He is the one who is shown great favoritism and is respected. Therefore, he is suitably adorned and arrayed, striding purposefully in the abundance of his influence and authority. the prophet says, I am sharing this message accurately, correctly, and verifiably to liberate and save many. Yasha'yah, the opening line of the 63rd chapter. Apart from Moshe and Dod, no other participant in Yahweh's story received such a claim. The reason God respects this man with blood on his clothing, which is attire that suits the occasion of the red heifer, is that he has striven forthrightly and with a sense of purpose and urgency, recognizing the responsibility and authority that God has placed on him. And since Yahweh has informed Yasha'yah, he is keenly aware that such an endorsement is unheralded. So he assures us that he is rendering Yahweh's position accurately. The bloody red man from Edom will do as Moshe and Dod have done. Yasha, liberate and save a great many people. And that the religious are searching for red cows in order to slaughter them instead of a man. This man is important. And it is important that we consider more of what Yasha'yah revealed at the conclusion of his prophetic witness. And in this case, the great prophet used bo, meaning comes, returns, and arrives, because like Moshe returning to Mitzrayim, and especially Dod, this individual will produce a written record of his insights during his lifetime, and then he will return to fulfill his mission. And at this point, Yasha'yah is addressing all three phases of his life. Also, by stating that the man in the bloody attire is coming out of Edom, Yasha'yah is designating him as a non-Israelite, affirming the Nakar, observant foreigner designation, which first was announced by Solomon. Further, Edom speaks of those things which are influenced by the legacy of Rome, which would include Roman Catholicism, Christianity, Europe, and America. He does not represent any of these things, but instead, like Moshe and Mitzrayim, has come men out of them.
Right.
Moreover, by saying this, unlike Moshe and Dod, who were descendants of Abraham, Yitzhak, and Jacob, the bloody red man is a goy. Also, while the progenitor of Edom, Esau, whom God hated, was described as a ruddy red color at birth, the crimson stains on this man's garments will have come from his willingness to die, so that Israel may live. He is the red heifer.
Yep.
Up to this point in the prophecy, the realization that the man tasked with preparing Israel for reconciliation will do so by debunking the political and religious proclivities of the Jewish people. And that has no doubt been cathartic, even for those loosely entangled in the prevailing culture of the Jewish people. And yet, from the outset of Yasha'yah's final revelation, the only prophetic text found completely intact among the scrolls preserved by the Essenes, we have learned that this Nakar, observant foreigner, will restore Yisrael by bringing them back to the Torah of Moshe, by leading the willing away from the Babylonian Talmud. And while that may be shocking to the senses of today's Israelites, it pales in comparison to the realization that the third Zeroah is symbolically a descendant of Esau, Jacob's disenfranchised brother. It's a bitter pill for the rebellious nation to swallow, along with her pride. And even this is telling, because Yada, as the red heifer, reconciles Yisrael to itself and also unto God, a God Yisrael no longer knows. Yahweh has made Yada and the red heifer less palatable by design. It's not supposed to be appealing. In fact, for those who go to the Yada Yah YouTube channel and watch the newest of the 3 songs the red heifer sings, it's gruesome.
Yeah.
And it needs to be, because that is the intent. God is going to say, this is my last chance to get your attention. This man died for you so that you could come clean. Symbolic descendant of Esau, who exposes the ugly soul of Judaism and of progressive Israeli politics, does so to save Yehudim from themselves. And he is Hadar, shown great favoritism, and is respected, honored, and honored on high. He is treated with distinction. What the rabbis have claimed for themselves, this exceptional Gentile has been afforded by God without asking. The very choder sucker who has belittled religious dress-up will be ba lubash, suitably adorned and arrayed by Yahweh through his Ruach Kodesh, both as a witness and as a sacrifice. This is so atypical. For a foreigner to garner Yahweh's respect, it's hard for us to even process. As surely was the case for Yasha'yah, who nonetheless devoted much of what he revealed to this specific individual.
Mm-hmm.
And so here the prophet strove to be resolutely accurate by dispensing with all potential equivocating commentary. This witness would be suitably adorned and arrayed to complete God's mission, striding with a sense of urgency as time descends from man's hourglass. With so few days remaining, and with the challenge being so great, this man will be operating with an abundance of God's power and authority. And this means that his testimony is accurate and inspiring. It also means that the prophet is describing the choder stem, who was the lone individual said to have been enlightened and empowered, then emboldened by the 7 Ruach of Yahweh. Affirming how distinct this is from everything else, Yasha'yah says something which only appears twice in all of the Torah, prophets, and Psalms. First, after presenting a long list of promises regarding Dod, Yahweh concludes by saying that we can call him a liar if it's not all true. And now we read Yasha'yah saying that he's telling us the truth, sharing this message accurately to liberate and save many. Therefore, we can surmise a number of things. First, this is so out of the norm, even for God, that a prophet is concerned that we won't take him seriously. Second, this revelation shades the way our generation will perceive Isaiah's viability and credibility. Third, the messenger and the message Yahweh and Yasha'yah is acknowledging, even endorsing, will actually liberate and save many, as did Moshe and Dod. In other words, this is important to Yah, to Yasha'yah, to Yahudah, to Yisrael. And therefore, since there is no other candidate for Yada and the Nesh sign that he has written, the Choder, the Nakar, or the Zeroah in our presence, much less the Adamah Parah, any attempt to disavow Yahweh's approach to his people is disrespectful of God's intent, and it is disruptive to his purpose. Doing so will be measured in lost lives. I'm going to, since we're about out of time, I'm going to play The Red Heifer Sings, and we will pick up our story this time next week.
The man from Edom comes as a red heifer. He arrives to cleanse God's ultimate treasure. He is Yada, the witness for our time, the voice of Yahowah so sublime. Like new, introducing us to the God we once knew. Yahowah is His beautiful name. Surely you're acquainted with His acclaim. He's at his Arrowah to cultivate souls. His story is told in the Dead Sea Scrolls. The next harvest is a Shabat heer. It's during a time of war to allay our fear. 7 years later, he'll herald the Towrah of God. Take advantage, lest your life be for naught. It's a cleaning of olives with some left behind, a remnant of Yehudim too blind to be realigned. Apparel they will slaughter, so we can dance in the cleansing water. He'll be pelted with our guilt as we peruse the scene. It's with the heifer's ashes that we come clean. The red heifer's ashes make us like new, introducing us to the God we once knew. Yahowah is His beautiful name. Surely you're acquainted with His acclaim. So now a herald comes before you of the Towrah you never knew. It's not Rosh Hashanah, too near the end. In 10 days' time, Messiah will descend. He's a witness for you, a man of many titles. Prophecies about to say why he is so vital. His is the voice calling out to lead us home. Will you follow him to our shalom? Yisrael, embrace your prince. This is his last chance to convince. Chosen people, welcome our king. Consider all Yada and don't bring. Yahweh and don't return on Kippurim. Don't you dare say Hashem or it will be grim. It is the gift of the bloody red heifer to bring us back and now together. Ashes and water do not misconstrue. It's the only way back to the God we once knew. So let's dance again before the glorious flame as we celebrate Yahweh's wonderful name. Yahweh, and don't return on Kippurim. Don't say Hashem. bring us back, and now together. These ashes and water do not misconstrue. It's the only way back to the God we once knew. So let's dance again before the glorious flame, as we celebrate Yahweh's wonderful name.
As we celebrate Yahweh's wonderful name, surely you're aware of his acclaim. It is truly an honor to be able to speak in the name of Yahweh, to convey his message to his people at this time on the cusp of his return. Yisrael, come home. Your God and your Messiah are awaiting your return. Today I want to thank you for arranging the lyrics that I wrote into a song. It is a powerful message to God's people, and I would encourage all who are listening to go to the Yada Yahowah YouTube channel, also on Rumble, and not only listen to this song, but watch it. The lyrics are all presented for you there, and the imagery is captivating. It's an amazingly powerful story.
Yes.
And it is a story that Yisrael needs to hear. So please don't just listen and watch the song. Please share it. Time is nigh. We're offering our last ounce of devotion. And
yes,
in the case of Dod, when he became the Passover lamb, and that Israel, his own people, rejected him and denied him, the pain of his people denying what he had done for them was far greater than what he endured at the hands of the beast of Rome. Now, Yahweh is not going to allow that to happen in the case of the red heifer because, well, time will not allow it. The earth could not survive it. The remnant would not live through it. Nonetheless, please do not perpetuate the animosity that you have shown your God and your Messiah. Please come home. Shabbat Shalom to everyone. We look forward to being with you this time next week.
Shalom, y'all.
Shabbat Shalom. Night, guys.